because it takes a second to come on. And remember, we're gonna have a comments section going
Yes.
on,
Yes.
which is always part of it, and is usually cool. I bet there's gonna be some people having stuff to say.
I hope. I mean, I'm a part of a community of mega Diamanda fans, so hopefully they're tuning in. They know everything, but they want to just like, her fan base is just. Do you know how crazy they are? Okay, it's 4 o'clock.
Yeah, I don't actually know how are Diamanda fans pretty rabid. I mean, it seems like the kind of music that would have a rabid fan base, right?
It's the kind of music that would have a rabid fan base. It's the kind of music that inspires people to. I mean, I know there are people that I follow who they make paintings. Like their whole life is making paintings of her.
Yeah.
Like sort of doing their whole thing is like tributes to her. I mean, I think it's appropriate. I think given her body of work, given her commitment to the art, it's very much. I think it comes from this opera diva place. A lot of the people that I know who are rabid Diamanda fans are also homosexuals, and so there's an opera queen thing that happens. Like they're homosexual men who are obsessed with opera in a particular kind of way. That kind of obsession bleeds into the Diamanda fan base.
Yeah. The gay opera thing, it's such a thing, and it's such a world that it's kind of like a bougie gay thing, right? I mean, it's very much not necessarily in a bad way, but kind of right. It's like very.
It isn't. I mean, I think there's a real difference between what Diamanda actually calls the furniture queens. The people who are just obsessed with sort of home decor and furnishings, versus these people who are dedicated to opera. I mean, opera isn't necessarily. I mean, the opera queens I know, at least anyway, are obsessed with it in a very kind of almost working class way. They have a lot of knowledge about it. They, like my voice teacher, for example, like he, I think it was in 1961, 62, the first thing he saw at the Metropolitan Opera was in Standing Room, and it was Joan Sutherland. I think it was Joan Sutherland doing Lucia de Lammermoor. Was his first thing. And so he...
Okay. Wait, sorry, who's your voice teacher? Give him a shout out.
My voice teacher's name is Ira Sif. Ira Sif is amazing. He had an opera company for about 20 years called Le Grand Shana Opera Company. You also, if you listen to the Metropolitan Opera broadcast, he is also a commentator for the broadcast on like Saturdays. So he has had this relationship with the Met for, I don't know, maybe a decade or more now, where he's been doing the broadcasts with them. Yeah. And then the Opera Guild, he does like talks and master classes with the Metropolitan Opera Guild. So he started out in opera in a very kind of like sort of DIY kind of punk way. Even if you think about opera being punk, like his opera company was very much, they were doing these spoofs that were like very like underground. And it was just sort of 4 other opera queens who were just sort of intense about the sort of the cult of like diva-ness and like all the kind of things that would go wrong, or the very idiosyncratic personalities of these opera divas. Because it used to be the Zinka Melanovs or the Galáses of the world. I mean, these old school opera divas, Magda Oliveira, or these people are very
grand dames.
These grand dames who had personalities. They were very like sort of idiosyncratic and very human. Anyway, so there was this kind of cult of opera queens who. There were also all these pirate recordings that would happen in opera land. So they would go to the operas and like make these recordings and then share them amongst themselves. And we're talking 60s, 70s.
It's like tape trading. It's like death metal in the 80s, man.
Yeah, exactly. Well, in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s. This is like old school before like technology was really great. So there was a whole kind of cult of that. And so Le Grand Shana kind of came out of that kind of cult of the opera queen. And what's ironic, actually, this actually leads into a Diamanda conversation, because what's significant about, because Ira started Le Grand Shana in I think it was 1981 was the first performance of Le Grand Shana. Right. And so all of these gay people were there in the audience doing, being a part of this thing. And through the life of Grand Shana, the last performance was 2001, and then he continued to do these recitals. The oldest living, his thing was his character was Madame Vera Guadalupe Borsch, was this Russian soprano character that he would do in drag. This is all happening in drag. And so he would continue to do these farewell, the 25th annual, or the first annual, second annual farewell recital. So, this thing of the divas who would do these farewell recitals
every time is the last time. Yeah. It's like Rolling Stones shit. It's
exactly. You'll never get to see them again. So you would do this thing with all these spoofs. So anyway, in the course of the life of the opera company from 1981 to 2001, all of their audience died. From 1888. And that's an interesting, I think, lead into Diamanda, because why I wanted to talk about Plague Mass and why I wanted to talk about Diamanda was because imagine this pandemic, we just had this pandemic moment happen. And imagine that pandemic killing all these people dying, was happening for about 6 years, and the United States government said nothing about it.
Yeah.
Ronald Reagan, Vice President, all of these sort of like political figures were completely and utterly silent about it. And it was like, affecting, a particular population that was also, they didn't want to say anything about it or acknowledge the existence of, for moral reasons, for religious reasons, for what, all the reasons we know. We don't have to imagine, we know very well. The religious right were very like, sort of against homosexuality. It's not the kind of place we're in now with gay marriage and all this kind of stuff.
She's pretty explicit about that in the piece. I mean,
very explicit about that. So I think that the context of like, and also her brother died. I think it's in 1986. And so in the context of a government not speaking the words HIV positive or AIDS, not saying anything about it, she's also involved in ACT UP, Diamanda Galas. She's been arrested at a protest, an ACT UP protest. So she's very much on the ground with the kind of protests happening around ACT UP. Her brother has died. The government has said nothing. Plague Mass emerges. And I think it's important to note with Plague Mass, it's a live performance that happens at Cathedral of St. John the Divine, the most acoustically exciting room I've ever been in. You've been to Cathedral of St. John the Divine, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Have you heard you've heard music there before?
I can't remember what I saw there though. No, I actually have not. My mom was singing in a choir that would meet there. So
see, I would imagine that you would have, as a young, music student would have had a chance to play there at some point, but
no.
But your mother, you're mother's soprano,
she's actually, my mom's actually a tenor. And her speaking voice is not insanely low, like you wouldn't necessarily it's sort of medium for a woman, but she's a tenor. She's not like a serious intense singer. She's just like a musical person who loves to, this is like kind of a gospel choir. I mean, amateur, kind of
amazing. No, that's amazing, but it's the most amazing. I mean, I got to play there actually in 2012. I did my piece Speculum Orm Shackles to the Dead in the cathedral. Actually, I played there a few times. I was a part of the whole day because there was a fire there. This was in 2008 maybe when I first played there. So I played like a 15-minute set the first time I played there. But the acoustics are just extraordinary. And so back to Diamanda. We're talking. This piece happens in 1990 at Cathedral of St. John the Divine. We've had not a word spoken about HIV and AIDS by the government.
Even at that point, there hadn't been, even in 1990.
Nothing.
That's fucking crazy. My dad's best friend Tony died of AIDS in 92, I think it was, and he got it really early on. I mean, he was a gay opera guy. He ran an opera company in Santa Fe.
Interesting.
And really good guy. He had an insane sports car.
That was what you loved about him. That was
it's just a cool. I was a little kid, but he was a real
sports
bon vivant, if you will.
A very sophisticated person, an opera queen.
Man.
And so I think so. Plague Mass happens. And she'd already started. So basically, it's a live performance, and so all of the material is actually being taken from her Massacre of the Red Death series, and so that's a collection, that trilogy of 3 albums: Divine Punishment, Saint of the Pit, and You Must Be Certain of the Devil. Those 3 albums, and so, but then Plague Mass is very much something else, even though the material is sort of taken from that sort of trilogy. It ends up being a very different animal.
It doesn't have she's not using other than drums and electronics. Well, there's a little bit of organ on one of them, right? But
and there's piano, like the last piece, like that people go.
But throughout the main, mostly throughout the thing, it's almost totally like voice and electronics and drums. Which is different because those 3 records. The trilogy you're talking about, some of those, most of those are like largely there's like electronic, there's like
deeply layered, like sonically layered. To me, when I was revisiting all of those pieces, like in preparation for this, I was thinking this prefigures a lot of like drone music that we hear now. It sort of prefigures a lot of sun.
This is I to be honest, man, those 3 records. Well, actually, the middle one, Saint of the Pit, I don't know that well, but the first and the third, I actually like those kind of more than Plague Mass. I know that like Plague Mass kind of has that vibe of the monumental, like the culmination of the whole thing. Yeah. I'm sure live, that was like, it's like a milestone in like music.
Yeah.
But as far as just listening to it, revisiting the stuff, I like the stuff like on You Must Be Certain of the Devil, like the stuff with the like electronic, like 80s sounding, like dated, not in a bad way, but this sort of
Well, one thing
dark
you would
wave
love.
synthesizer shit sounds like Coil, kind of like the
Well, one thing you
beats.
would
Like
love, and I don't know if you noticed this about who produced it, but it's one of Depeche Mode's producers,
oh,
produced
okay,
the "You
sure.
Must Be Certain of the Devil"
Yeah, you
record.
can. Yeah.
Because I mean, I think that she was also. I think Depeche Mode at that time was also on Mute Records. I think they
Yep.
were like
They
also.
were.
So, yeah. So I mean,
Yeah.
she was. So Mute released that record, and so there's like all this crossover. And I know that you have a particular affection
For
Depeche
sure.
Mode.
Oh yeah, yeah. Oh no, big time, big time. But her whole, yeah. I mean, well, I went back and listened to the first the Litanies of Satan. The first. Wait, is that the
Yeah.
first or the second?
Litanies of Satan is her first release officially,
That's
and the sort of the B side was Wild Women with Steak Knives.
Wild Women with Steak
and
Knives,
that's in 1981, 82.
Yeah. That shit is like, yeah, man. I mean, it's cool to just hear her like in this context of like, even if she weren't this opera diva, even if she hadn't done anything else, even if she literally just did that one record,
Yeah.
that would still be like, okay, this is kind of like an important noise record or something, even just on its own.
Sure, yeah. I mean, if you
So
didn't know that this was all her voice, that was being processed through, that she's this human. I mean, it's really superhuman what she's able to do with her voice. And I mean, why? Because I listen to, I hear what you're saying in terms of like the kind of vibe of listening to Divine Punishment and You Must Be Certain of the Devil. I mean, all the layering, all the multi-tracking that happens on those records. I mean, I get how that could be, a more desired listening experience than like a live record where you just have this direct thing. But the second track, listening, this is the law of the plague, all the stuff about Leviticus.
Yeah, unclean. I mean,
that, like, you comparing that recording at the beginning of Divine Punishment, like that sort of studio recording versus the live thing, what's happening emotively and lethargically, and not lethargically, but cathartically on that way. And then all the high notes she inserts in are just like, it's just, I mean, I was in tears listening to it again. Like the opening, the Novatic Sinfino, and that I was just in tears because of the voice beyond, I mean, the voice just has all this indignation in it that is just so, there are these cries, these guttural cries that are so visceral, but then what she's doing technically as a singer is just so extraordinary. I mean, the
control, the control over it, man. I mean, this is, there's something almost like part of what I find so bone chilling about a lot of it is that, yeah, it's like there's all the emotion in it, but then it's the stuff reaches this breaking point where it stops sounding human at all and starts to sound just like noise or electronic music, which almost is extra emotional because she's sort of, it becomes cold for a moment. There's like the fire of pain and mourning just turning into material, and then you're just dealing with pure sound that doesn't even sound emotional for a second. It becomes just it becomes cold, and then back to a human singing. It's this in and out of material,
It'll hit you again. There's something about a superhuman. I mean, that she would. It's just so interesting that, like, I mean, opera is my thing. But most opera singers, most people who train that way wouldn't lend this highly, I mean, there's really a Wagnerian kind of flexibility she has, and power and stamina. I mean, to sing like that,
it's athletic.
It's like it's intensely athletic thing that is really only really Wagnerian. She's even spoken of this in interviews. Only really Wagnerian singers can sing that way for that long. That someone who has that ability technically would lend that kind of power, that kind of technique, that kind of godlike, instrument, that kind of godlike prowess to this particular subject matter, and the subject matter of all of her. I mean, if you look at her entire oeuvre, it's always in service of the damned. She's the queen of the damned, really. It's always in service of the least of these, if we're going to be biblical again about it. The people, the suffering, the people who have been placed in insane asylums. I mean, she's always focused her particular instrument, and it's a tool of torture, I mean, but also a tool of love. It can do so many different things that she would put it in service of all of these the least of these. Like the only way I can sort of talk about it is the least of these. Particularly in this piece, these people who were forgotten by the government. You know, all of these homosexuals who were dying of AIDS, who were just being sort of discarded. That she would live. Yeah.
Yeah, well, the abjection, you know, of the subject matter and the sound of her voice being so like broken and shredded, but then the rigor of the technique is sort of this respect for the abject. You know?
Yeah, I mean, even if you just take all the content out and just look at it as pure form, I mean, I think it's unfair to do that with her work because the content is very important. But really, I mean, I just as a metal person, like this is the law of the plague and all the unclean. That second track, as a metal person, I mean, because I know that like Terrorizer magazine, like has always reviewed her.
Yes.
And they compared her to Slayer, like her with one release, Guilty from like 2008. She released. They talked about it. Relatives. They were like Slayer fans would really enjoy this. And I think that's completely true.
I think she appeals to metal. I mean, I'm sure punk people as well, but I think metal probably like even more so. You know.
Well, it's the cultivation. I mean, like metal is one of the few sort of popular musical forms that values being able to really play.
Technique,
you know?
yes.
Yeah.
Unabashed virtuosity is a big part of so much of metal, and people appreciate
and
that.
And a word that you use a lot when you talk about music is brutal, and I think that brutal is a perfect word to talk about Diamanda's body of work in general, her entire oeuvre, but especially Plague Mass, and especially This Is the Law of the Plague, all the clean stuff is a brutal. It's relentless. I mean, if any man, I know I want to do it. Has an issue. I mean, she's relentless.
Unclean. Yeah, I mean the repetition of it, you know.
And then moving from that text, this sort of almost spoken text, into these like these really high notes that are just brutal and that like spin. I mean, the spinning vibrato that's so fast that it like sort of breaks apart. It's then becoming like this microtonal where she's almost in like singing more than one note. I mean, the vibrato is so fast, it's so quick.
Well, this is another thing, you know. It's like, I mean, I'm not a huge opera fan really at all. I mean, Wagner, yes, and then some 20th century stuff, yes, but classic opera, not really where I'm at. But there's something about the control when vibrato is controlled. I mean, the bel canto style is so about huge vibrato, but when that vibrato it's controlled to an extent where it's not just like a given. You know, it's not just like, oh, of course, there's just this vibrato as an effect. When it becomes becomes less of an effect and more of like a parameter.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, what's interesting about Diamanda, though, I mean, she's also, I mean, I want to talk very personally about why. I mean, this was the first thing I ever heard from Diamanda.
Yeah. Did you study with her or no? Or
No. She hasn't given lessons to anyone, but I did. Right. So I moved to New York in 2006. And so part about why I moved here is to work with my voice teacher, Iris Sif. I had a voice teacher in San Francisco who actually, I was living in San Francisco before I moved to New York, and I would come to New York to like have voice lessons with Ira because he's just incredible. I mean, he's this like man who is sort of an expert on working with other men in soprano range. I mean, most of his students are female sopranos, but he knows so well through his own voice and through study and through everything. He knows everything about singing, and was the best singer for developing my male soprano like sound. And so I came to New York for one lesson, and then I went back to my teacher in San Francisco and played him like the recording that I made for my teacher from Ira. And he said, "You need to move to New York and work with this man. He's like the guy you need to work with." Yeah. That's intense when one teacher tells you to go work with a different teacher. So
well, you believe him. Yeah.
You believe him. Yeah. Because I mean, it's their income. It's their, and so I moved here in 2006. My second week in New York, I was going to a lesson with Ira, and Ira is like, in the East Village. I won't say particularly where he is, but so leaning up against an NYU building, he's like, so there's the street he's on. There's an NYU building like a block away because I'm early. Because I'm usually early for everything. I like being early.
I remember that with working together.
So yes, that's right. I'm very committed to being early.
You like to break stereotypes, so it's good.
I mean, okay, we're not whatever. Many Black people are very early. Anyway,
I know.
But anyway, colored people time is a thing that Black people, often hold on to. And so anyway, so early for my lesson, so I'm like sort of just singing scales or whatever, just sort of warming up or whatever, leaning against this NYU building. This woman walks by and she's like, "That's a really good sound." And I look up, and it's Diamanda Galas.
Oh,
And
shit.
and I was like, "You're Diamanda Galas," which is just, I mean,
just showing up in New York right to Diamanda, man.
I mean, it was really.
I know it's kind of cheesy, but like I do no, it's fuck it, it's not cheesy. The whole like I do believe in that sort of cosmic energy, like attracting, like synchronicity.
I mean, of all the singers in the world,
not a coincidence. You know what I mean? That is
not,
something that kind of that happened for some reason. You know,
I completely agree with you. And so I mean, I say you're Diamanda Galas. I mean, clearly she knows who she is, and then she has a moment of paranoia. She's like, wait, how do you know who I am? And I'm like, I'm a fan of your work. And then so she relaxed. And then she said, you're a man, but you're making what is a soprano sound. And so she got really intrigued with my voice and how I was making the sound I was making. And so I talked about middle voice. We talked about technique and technical things and all this, and the whole conversation was about 13 minutes. And she was doing a show at Spiegel Tent where she was starting to do all her sort of Edith Piaf, like sort of things, like Heaven Have Mercy and these kinds of French songs. This was in 2006. And so she was like, I'll put you on the list for the show. And I was like, oh, thank you so much. And my email, because I had like a CDR of my music, because I just moved to New York and I was like, I'm a musician or whatever. And so I had the CDR and it had my like email address on it or whatever. She's like, oh, I'll like email you. So I gave it to her. Anyway, it's so ridiculous. Anyway, it feels ridiculous to have handed her my music because, it's almost, I'm almost embarrassed that I did it at this point. But she actually listened to it and I had a version of Balm in Gilead that she really responded to. She really enjoyed the spiritual, which she also sang. Her version is obviously very different than mine. I mean, her version of everything is really different. And so what's important, so I bring all that up to say that my first introduction to her was, I'm from Alabama, Mobile, Alabama, and it was my first year in college in San Francisco. I was like 18 or 19 years old. And I had this roommate, and I was listening to opera all the time because, I'm like one of those people, we know that I'm obsessed with opera. This happened, I don't know how it happened to me, like 8 years old, I heard my first sort of opera thing on the radio, and I was intrigued by it. And then I saw Leontyne Price on television, and then it was just all over. It was just like, this was like my life, after seeing Leontyne Price, and I became obsessed with it. And so I was like listening to, I think I was listening to lots of Cavalier for Rusticana, the Jesse version of it. And anyway, my voice just says I had no interest in hearing Jesse Norman sing that opera, because it's a very Italian, very like, sort of like working class kind of like Verismo opera. Anyway, he doesn't think that Jesse has the proper Italianate sound. He's very particular about that Italianate style. Anyway,
okay.
But I was obsessed with it. And I love that opera. That music is amazing. So I was listening to that all the time and blasting it. And my roommate was like this like gay guy with all these piercings and tattoos. And my first roommate to attempt suicide, by the way, he did. He's still. I think he didn't succeed. But it was a very good friend. And then years later, I had another roommate who attempted suicide. This is my life in San Francisco. Roommates attempting suicide. Anyway, so he was like, oh my God, you like opera so much, do you like Diamanda? And I was like, who's that? And then he got so excited. He was like, oh my God, I can't believe you know who she is. And so he put on Plague Mass. And I just was kind of stunned. And it just rearranged me. It rearranged my DNA. In the first, she's, there's no more tickets to the funeral's crowded, that whole business. And then she goes into Were You There when they, crucify my Lord.
Yeah. Oh, no, okay.
That's spiritual.
Keep going. I had, yeah.
But I had my relationship to that spiritual. I heard it in church, obviously, especially around Easter. I grew up in like an AME church, Black church. But especially Leontyne Price doing an a cappella version of that on this compilation recording. I listened.
Wait, Leontyne Price doing a version of which now?
Of Were You There When They Crucified My Lord?
Which is, okay, an
African American spiritual. Many white country artists have done it, but it's like it starts with my people. And she does a lot of Diamanda does that, and Swing Low Sweet Chariot is also part of the Plague Mass. And I had this relationship to that music already through these opera singers singing, African American spirituals, Negro spirituals. But I hadn't heard it with such indignation, with such a punk rock sensibility and anger or rage. Because culturally, the opera was always like, I think people associate with a very bourgeois thing. Was never a bourgeois person.
And European.
European, yeah. That whole thing.
What it is.
My relationship to it was I came to it through these Black singers who, and Leontyne singing a spiritual in an operatic voice it's very Black. Even though she's very much in the bel canto tradition, the way she sings opera is very Black. It was never like a bourgeois thing, and all of my cultural like markers were all punk and goth, you know, at the time. I mean, it was all like that kind of subculture. So this opera thing I was doing over here wasn't a thing I was really doing with like friends, you know, like friends of mine weren't engaged, you know, they weren't engaged with that. They were like listening to like, you know, The Cure or, you know, the Smiths or like, you know, something, some, you know, so that was like the first time I'd heard that kind of technique being used in service of something else, you know, something, this kind of indignation, like to say something like that was very important and very
urgent. I mean, her style, I mean, I sort of forgot how bluesy it is. I mean, I mean, even like, I mean, her sort of speaking voice for the speaking parts is, I mean, she does kind of have a certain black,
raspy.
You know,
she has
just accent, you know, sort of black. I mean, you know, like she's sort of, it's like she seems more in the blues tradition than in the opera tradition, even though when she goes high, it's clearly opera technique. But I mean, I hear more black music in it than European music.
Well, I think it's important
actually, you know.
I mean, that her early, I mean, you know, obviously she was a prodigy. I don't know if people know. Do you know she was a prodigy on the piano?
Well, well, you can hear it. I mean, she's, I don't even know if people talk about, she's almost as good a pianist as she is a singer. I mean, she's a serious virtuoso. I saw her, I can't remember what the outdoor show is, but I mean, she rarely does concerts. You were there, I'm sure, the Red Bull Music Academy thing.
I was actually doing my own show. I think I was in California.
Too bad.
I didn't see that, but I've seen her 13 times. I mean,
okay, so you've seen,
I've seen her live.
She doesn't do a lot of concerts, but that was, I mean, when I saw that, I was as blown away by her piano playing as her singing.
She was playing. Well, she's from San Diego. She was playing with like the San Diego Symphony at like 13 or something. Like, you know, this piano. I mean, she started playing when she was like, I don't know, 5 or 6 or something. Piano. Her father was a musician. And she also would accompany a gospel choir that her father like sort of directed.
So that's her roots before opera, right? Is gospel.
Certainly. Absolutely, because she didn't really start singing in earnest until she went to university, because her father didn't really. He thought that singers were just on stage to try to let people know where they'd be after the show. This is a great famous quote. He didn't really respect singers as musicians, you know, like as people who had real skill. And so
I'm gonna remember that though. My days of that are over, but there's something to that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's another joke about singers. How do you know when a singer's at your door? Have you heard this joke before? How do you know
actually, no.
They don't know where to come in and they can't find their keys.
Okay.
It's like a conservatory. Yeah. So there's like, you know, so some musicians had no respect for singers, and it was also just not a thing that a woman would be doing in her father's house. So she would secretly sing when he wasn't there, and then really got into like intensely training in college. Like sort of as operatic training. So, but I think that it's important to know that she was, you know, coming out of this blues jazz thing. I mean, she had this gospel choir background where she's playing for them, and also she played with like a lot of free jazz, like Bobby. I can't remember the name. Like Bobby, like she played with him. Piano.
She was in. She played with Mark Dresser, the bassist, in the early '70s, and I only know this from Wikipedia. Just looking her up to do homework on this.
Yeah. And with John Zorn too, actually.
Well, that was in the '80s. Well, that was my introduction to her. Actually, was just her being one of a billion people on his Ennio Morricone record, the Big Gun Down, and that was just where I learned just that. Those was like everyone on that record is like a roster of just like all these downtown people, like how I found out about these. So it was like but she doesn't even do that much on that. It's just sort of like using parts of her voice. It's not,
but I feel like she did an entire album with John Zorn, though. I think separate from that, I feel like I heard
an
entire album with John Zorn. That, like, I feel like I've heard a lot of material that's extraordinary. Like with John Zorn, and John Zorn. I mean, I saw John Zorn with Thurston Moore at what is now Performance Space New York, maybe in 2010. Maybe.
Well, you know, I'm a huge Zorn fan. You know how I feel.
I mean, but one of my favorite shows of all time. I mean, like that John Zorn and Thurston Moore had more to do with John Zorn, but still, like, I mean, that was one of the best shows I've ever seen. And Diamanda, I mean, I've seen her 13 times, but I think my favorite show, she used to do these shows, The Knitting Factory, on Valentine's Day. Valentine's Day, ironically, is coming up. But she would do these, like, what she would call St. Valentine's Day massacres, and she would play 2 shows. So in 2008, I got tickets for both the shows. So she would do an early show and a late show. And so it was interesting watching her play, because she did the same material, and it was so different. Like, specifically, You Don't Know What Love Is. It was very kind of jazzy and very
That's one of my favorite standards, man. That is
It's
just
it's heart wrenching. But her
Yeah.
version, so in the first show, amazing, incredible, not whatever, but amazing, incredible. I'd not heard her do that song before. The second show, she held the note for this line, to spend each dawn with sleepless, and sleepless she holds for like, I don't know, 2 minutes or something, that note. And it's straight tone, by the way, no vibrato. She does a lot of straight tone singing.
Well, that's what I love, dude. But mixing that shit up. I mean, I love that in singing. I love that in horn playing or whatever.
Yeah.
When you can take it away, and
Yeah,
it's
when
like
this control vibrato.
like I said before, yeah, where it's not a given. It's
Well, I mean, jazz
it's
people-
a thing that can be turned off and all the way on.
And she's really, I mean, even more than the opera and the blues. I mean, she's really like a jazz person. I mean, she talks a lot about Cecil Taylor being a huge influence in terms of what she wants to do with her voice, the way Cecil Taylor sort of plays the piano. But later on, her piano playing, though, I think even like there's All the Way, this song All the Way, she has this Cecil-esque ways of playing
Well, I was
piano.
gonna say, yeah, like her piano playing is. I've never heard her do Cecil stuff in the sense of atonal harmonic stuff.
Sure, yeah.
But the way she plays jazz stuff has that erratic, dynamically so erratic and like spiky and all over the place that like you can tell that she's coming from that. Like
she's an intense jazz person, and so the straight tone thing not versus the vibrato, but she's like, no, actually she's commented about like. Anyway, I sent her my record. She said about me that I have a controlled vibrato, which I thought was very sweet. But again, this isn't about me. I was talking about her, but it is about me in as much as like I was remembering the first time I heard her. My roommate John, my first roommate in San Francisco, who introduced me to this homosexual who was pierced and tattooed and very like this alternative type person who were typically my people. I mean, I love everyone, but I mean, I especially love alternative types. Gorgeous, also John's gorgeous boy. We never had sex, but such a beautiful, beautiful boy. Gorgeous. Anyway, but that moment of my first, I think it's like rearranged my DNA, like hearing her for the first time.
Those moments, man. They can still happen when you're older, but they don't happen as frequently. And I've often said this. It's like the opposite of trauma. It's like a thing that hits you hard and you can't, you have to just deal with it for the rest of your life in a positive way, but you can't go back. You can't unknow this experience with listening or with playing. I mean, certain things where you're like, this is now the standard. And I have to integrate it. You take years to even integrate it the same way you have to integrate like trauma, it's like you have to,
Well, I mean, she's also like, I would say, the gateway to the avant-garde, the avant-garde music world to me. I mean, like, I guess in the way John Zorn was, introduced you to all these different people. I mean, she was like all like Cecil Taylor, like even actually Mary Williams, the gospel singer. Like, I think I had an appreciation for her gospel sound. She has this like crazy fast vibrato, this like spinning vibrato that's just like insane, and this like spinto. It's a good. I mean, I guess you can call in terms of the different kinds of sopranos, in opera, they're all these, there's a lyric soprano, there's a coloratura soprano, there's like a mezzo soprano. I mean, she would be a lirico spinto soprano, meaning that there's like, this fast vibrato, and it's not as, it's also more flexible. It has the flexibility of like, say, lyric soprano, but like it has some of the weight of a dramatic soprano, like in the Wagnerian sense. Of that kind of weight, but like more flexibility than like a lot of the Wagnerian sopranos. But anyway, so Lyrico Spinto soprano, and Mary Williams, the gospel singer. Like the first time I heard her was after I had fallen in love with Diamanda, and Diamanda, I guess sonically that it just opened up so much. Like of the music that I love in the world in which I would like want to exist, and this I think also that she's an avant-garde musician working like beyond this piece. Plague Mass, which is so important, that trilogy, the Mask of the Red Death trilogy, Ficciones, which is this like thing about the Armenian and Turkish genocide that happened. Of course, she's of Turkish descent. She's I'm sorry, Greek. She's a Greek.
She's Greek.
God, but the Turkish Armenian genocide affected a lot of Greeks as well. No, she's of course. Please, I apologize to all Diamanda fans for misstating that. We're watching.
I'm kind of struck. I actually just not that I know all of her records, but just like what I've heard, given that she's Greek, there's actually surprisingly little like overtly Greek influence. I mean, I hear it sometimes, some stuff that sounds like it's from that part of the world, or have I not checked some shit out? I mean, does she do like any traditional Greek music?
Do you know Dificciones? Do you know that record? Dificciones, Last Will and Testament. So that's the piece that's specifically about the. I think it's the 1914. Oh, this is. Please, someone in the chat can correct me. I think I'm getting the dates wrong. There, the Turkish-Armenian genocide that happened. Apparently, her father would talk about it. Like, this is a part of her life growing up.
I'm wondering if we're like, oh fuck, dude. No, it's not. Wait a minute. Let me check this out, because I think I may have had this on some kind of private mode. Is that possible?
Are people? I'm just looking in the chat to see if people.
There's 15 people watching, so I'm not sure what.
Hey, are we live? Just someone in the chat.
I'm seeing all this. Yeah, I'm seeing all this. I'm seeing all these comments on the YouTube page, but not on
the live stream.
Not on the live stream page. Let me see if. Okay, here we go. Here's what it is. It's public. It's public in reality, but it's private on the StreamYard. So what we can do is we can keep checking. I'll keep checking back in with the comments here, and we'll just.
Someone did say you're live. Someone did say that.
Yeah. So we can't. So on the StreamYard platform, we can't interact with folks because I've like set it up a little bit off. But in the YouTube, we could interact.
Yeah, no, and I've got my YouTube open. Like,
yeah. So in any case, wait. So bringing it back.
Yeah, where were we? We were talking about Dificciones, Last Will and Testament.
Oh yeah. I was asking about like what's up with what is up with her? Yeah, like using Greek influences.
Yeah, I think
in
that's
her music,
the record.
Like, does she? Is it? Yeah.
That's the record where that happens. I think the most.
Yeah.
And I think it might be my. I mean, it's so hard with her work because it's so much of it is deeply important to me. But in terms of a piece, that might be my favorite piece of hers, Dificciones, Last Will and Testament. It's such a. It's just so beautiful, and there's a lot of what she does these like she's working with like scales that are not like Western scales,
ornamentation and stuff. I mean, that is this sort of microtonal stuff that happens in the Near Eastern music. I mean, I'd like to investigate. Yeah, maybe that's the record I should check out to sort of hear her do like that side of.
Yeah, that side of her work. I think it is most manifest there. I think later on in some of her live stuff that's not released. I think she has like I know she has a lot of Spanish songs, a lot of French songs. So, I mean, I think Dificciones would be the record if you're interested in that. That kind of side of her. But she's she's ultimately very American. I think she probably I don't know how. I know she would appreciate that, but American in the best sense of like she gets that the best of quote unquote American music is black music.
I think of her as very American. Although, I don't know, Europeans have this. I did this like composition. I did this like composer like residency fellowship student thing in when I was like 25, and Rebecca Saunders, one of the composers, she was like, she said like, you're very American, distinctly American, and she just meant it in the most snide, like absolute backhanded,
Yeah.
But to me, I'm taking that as yeah.
Well, I mean, but she's so rooted in the jazz tradition. I mean, that when she got to what's The Guardian? It was some magazine where she could list all of her favorite records or whatever, and they were all like there was a lot of Miles Davis records on it. There was a lot of jazz. It was like primarily jazz recordings, which is I think extraordinary feat. And then she's very like. Patty Waters, the singer, she's very interested in Patty Waters, the singer. Do you know her?
Yeah, Patty. I do know Patty Waters. Yeah, and she doesn't get. I don't hear about her enough. She's sort of. I mean, she's known, but.
But I mean, what she's doing with "Black Is the Color by True Love's Hair," that version of that song, I think is a template in many ways for what Diamanda's doing. Also, there's this record with the drummer. God, this Abby Lincoln. Abby Lincoln has a record with is it Charlie Park? The drummer. She's doing like a lot of vocalizing that's very, I think, reminiscent of what Diamanda does. I mean, if you're trying to look for really Diamanda is it kind of just sprang out of nowhere, really. I mean, if you're trying to sort of place her in some kind of a lineage, it really is. She's really her own thing, and just kind of like fell out of the sky. Like, I mean, in the Sun Ra sense of the word, like she's sort of descended from Saturn or something.
Yeah.
But if you're trying to place her, like, maybe Patty Waters, maybe Abby Lincoln, obviously.
No,
I mean,
she's her own thing. I mean, I gotta say, a lot of the time when it comes to avant-garde European music of the 20th century, when it comes to like extended technique, and I know that term can be kind of like muddy or sort of not really deep and not sort of shallow in a way. But if you're talking about like you're talking about like composers using instruments to make noise sounds or in a non-traditional way. When composers do that with the voice, 99% of the time I find it cringe, actually.
Oh yeah.
So it's kind of, it's like my friend described it as say it, don't spray it, in when we're talking about that kind of thing. But so it's like, you really have to be this level of virtuoso for me to feel it, but because it also doesn't feel like extended technique. It's sort of just the noise elements are like a natural outgrowth of the pitched elements, and it all kind of is the blends together. It's not like
well, I mean, she also, I think because it ends up having a different kind of integrity than a lot of singers, because there's so much that's gone into it. Like before the performance that you will ever see with her, there's been like all this study of like, bel canto technique and operatic arias. Like she does, she's like, she doesn't perform them for us, but allegedly does them constantly with voice teachers and studies them, and that kind of stuff just show up in the music I think like the way you're doing scales all the time, like when you play guitar or piano, whatever, or sing scales, that plays shows up in the music. All the kind of work that you do in all these other kinds of forms shows up. Like if you're working in a rigorous way to like sort of perfect that stuff. And so I mean, she's just no joke. She's no joke. And so beyond, but we've established she's this powerhouse. We've established that, Danny Filth, from Cradle of Filth, loves her. He talks about her all the time. Like,
I don't know. Yeah.
Danny, Cradle of Filth, they're like a British.
Oh, the guy from Cradle of Filth. Okay, yeah.
The singer from Cradle of Filth, talks about her like all the time and just like worships her and idolizes her. And she actually like jokingly says, I love it when those guys talk about me. They're so adorable or something like that, which is hilarious because people think of them not that way.
Well, she's an older generation. You know what I mean? She's an older generation. I mean, if you think about so she comes out in like 82 with like Litanies of Satan or something like that.
81, 82. But
81, 82.
But she had her premiere in a work that wasn't hers in like 1979. That was something that like a piece that like Synaxis, the Greek
Xenakis.
She premiered with a piece like internationally. It was her European premiere was in 1979 with one of his pieces.
It's funny. I actually don't know what piece that is, which I should know because Xenakis is like definitely one of my favorite post-war composers, like by far. I mean, you want to talk about Greek, putting Greeks on the map, like bro.
Well, I mean, I think that her connection to him and then emerging doing her own work. I mean, she's just such a.
She's coming out in 81. I mean, that's before Metallica's first record. I mean, that's before Kill 'Em All. So I mean, as far as metal, I mean, she's really more a part of more in common with like Throbbing Gristle or something, or like White House or something than.
Yeah, I guess I think you're right. I think she's like really, and have you heard her latest record on Broken Gargoyles? Oh my god! I mean, speaking of noise, because she's again layering her voice in this like. I mean, it just came out late last year. This is also I don't know how old she is now, but so from 1981, 82 to like. Yeah.
I don't think she's even that old. I don't even think she's 70 or.
She's not 70.
I mean, I think she's like not 70, she's like 60. Yeah.
Yes, somewhere in that realm. But then she's been making work that long, and this new record is like incredible. It's just like so. It's like she's back to. She had this. I mean, I feel like after these like major work, like so there's like all this stuff, the trilogy and then Litanies of Satan, that kind of work. And then she ends up like doing like a lot of the 90s and early 2000s, a lot of like song sort of like things where she's covering all these blues songs. Like the Thrill Is Gone, My World's Empty Without You, the Supreme song. She does an amazing cover of. So she has this sort of middle period where she's not doing. I mean, she's incorporating a lot of that kind of vocal experimentation in these songs. Like The Thrill Is Gone, she does that in beautifully. Or This song, 8 Minutes for Women. This is like a sort of an R&B kind of bluesy song where she
Yeah.
incorporates this extended vocal thing. Oh, Death, this like kind of folk song where she, includes within the song structure this kind of extended technique, this extended vocal technique. So there's this middle period where she's doing all these like sort of piano voice recitals or concerts.
Yeah.
Where she's singing all these songs, but then, and that's been maybe it's even like easier to book gigs like that because more and more people can relate to that versus like her doing these like epic pieces, like the Stryax piece that she did in like the maybe '96. I saw that piece like twice at Performance Space New York when she was doing that piece in like '96.
Well, there's something kind of deep. I think maybe, if you're just known as a sort of not just a singer, but like a conceptualist and this sort of composer and everything, I could see there'd be something mid-career like deep about just being like, you know what? I'm also just a singer piano player. Like just stripping it down to like, I don't have to go full, I don't have to do the Wagnerian ambition. I can just sing you a song and it's still
But she ends up, the first record of that is The Singer in like '92 maybe, and so
right, it's called The Singer. There you go.
The Singer, exactly. The Singer, and so she does like stuff that she did on Playing Mass, Were You There, and Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, with piano, and it's like, but she with Were You There, that she takes the middle of it, for this like sort of like extended, vocal thing. Or I Put a Spell on You. That's a great example. Like J. Hawkins song.
She's so good at that. Yeah. Well, you do this kind of thing where you have suites and pieces that use some of your older songs embedded in them, and and you have stuff. I mean, you do like an Erykah Badu song, right? I mean, this stuff of like taking, as a jumping off point, for what you already do. For what you do on everything, as a, but as yeah.
No, for sure. And so I think that it's like that, but that's a great example with that. But it's funny because she's singing the song, straight more or less, and then comes this like explosive middle part, but she's, I guess like the solo, if you're like being jazzed about it, where she solos and then sort of goes into all the stratosphere craziness that she's able to do. So there's this interesting middle period, but now it's so interesting that she's like Broken Gargoyles. I mean, it emerges from the pandemic. She emerges from the pandemic, and I think it first started as an installation, so a sound installation that was quadraphonic. So it was like it happened at a gallery. So she was like constructing and layering her voice for this kind of like, I mean, I think actually if you go back to Stryax, '96, piece. Well, she in Performance Space New York, she had this quadraphonic sound where you basically, you're surrounded by her voice, and she was like, sending it to different, sort of behind you, maybe, and just behind you, and maybe on the side of you, this kind of thing. So she started sort of playing around with that in like '96, and then this latest installation that sort of happened like maybe pre-pandemic and during the pandemic was like that, and this album ended up being a sort of an outgrowth of that kind of experimentation. So she's just utterly fascinating to me. That she can, be in this like intensely abstract kind of place where she's kind of, I mean, it sounds a lot more like Litanies of Satan, this piece of the stuff she's been doing for like the last, 15, 20 years. It's more back to, Litanies of Satan and Wild Woman with Steak Knives kind of thing, that kind of Diamanda. It's amazing. Maybe...
No, you go ahead.
I was just maybe arguably her best work, but I mean, all of it's good. So
I'm interested. I do like the role of the devil in this music. I'm interested in like the idea of evil in this stuff, like and your take on this, because I mean, people talk the way the figure of the devil. I think it's changed over time, like with her, like you can hear, like with this, like with Plague Mass, right? Like she's part of what she's railing against, right, is the sort of use of Christianity to say that gay people deserve this plague, but then. So there's a sense of copying the stance of evil to be like, oh, you think we're evil? Well, we are evil. Fuck you. But then there's also
or give me sodomy or give me death.
Right. Yeah. This thing of like, this kind of like thing of, owning what they are accusing you of being. Like, okay, fine. You think I'm the Antichrist? I am the Antichrist, right? But then there's also the reverse thing where they're like, she's saying that the hypocrites are evil, the homophobes are evil, and so there's this like reversing like apocalypse, this sort of apocalyptic thing of being like,
Mhm.
no, you're the ones who are going to be culled or judged, in the final thing. I mean, I don't know. Like, I'm interested in kind of just like your take on the devil, because I know it's like kind of plays this thing in your work, but then there's the Christian aspect,
Well, oh yeah. Well, I used to jokingly sort of refer to myself as a devil worshipping free black man in the blues tradition.
Right, right,
Um,
right. Which, like, I don't know, but I never knew
it concerned a
really.
lot of people. That really concerned a lot of people when I would say that, which is, anyway, I guess part of the point of calling yourself that. But I think that when you look at the devil and her work, you have to go back to Lindsay to Satan, actually, that particular Baudrillard text.
So
Baudrillard text.
It's a Baudelaire.
Baudelaire, I'm sorry, the
Yeah.
Baudelaire text. Yes,
If
thank
she
you so
did
much.
Baudrillard, that would be fucking.
That would be crazy.
That's more my wheelhouse. But yeah.
Yeah, but the Baudelaire text, actually, specifically the Lindsay Satan text, has devils and angels in the text. Devils, I mean, and I think that I even saw an interview where she was talking about them being sort of one and the same thing, that they're not, you can't sort of move away from each other. If you think about, Lucifer Morningstar, he is in fact a fallen angel. If you think literally about where he is in the biblical sense. So are we all fallen angels in a way? But then, but the devil, I think, in Plague Mass, maybe it's these like homophobic sort of politicians. They become the devil in some kind of manifestation of it. But then she's seeing angels and devils. I mean, in the first piece, the Norma Texas Funeral Line, she's seeing angels and devils. I mean, I think that one of the things that's so compelling about the piece is that she puts herself very much in the state. Partially, there's the indignation part, the railing against the system, but she's also putting herself in the state of the dying person, the person who was dying, and the kind of, and Vina Cava, the piece that she released, the recording she released right after Plague Mass, is a better example of this kind of almost dementia-like state that people exist in or existing in when they were dying.
Yes,
And so the seeing the devils and angels is, it's almost like the Red Fox thing. I'm having a heart attack. I'm going to see this kind of like going to see heaven or kind of thing. So I mean, it's very serious. I think it's very serious in her work. I think it's not casual. I think it's very poignant. I mean, one of the things that she said to me when I first met her on the street is she was like, keep working on this technique, this like, because she's like, with this way of singing, you can reach the gods. She said to me, and I'll really never forget that. She was very. And she's not an atheist. She's like very much agnostic. She says, I'm like, she's like, we're Greek, and
But she's agnostic or gnostic.
Agnostic, just meaning that I think she believes this. I don't think she believes there's life after. Well, I think it's complicated. She doesn't believe in a God, but she does. I think she has an investment in a higher power. This is, the God.
Dude, I've been saying, man, if you're an artist, even if you think that you're an atheist, you're not really. I mean,
well, maybe you're just a bad artist. I mean, because I think
well, I think if you're an artist, you're a bad atheist. I mean, you're sort of like I feel like
art is a holy thing. I mean, it's a holy.
Whether you like it or not, it is.
I mean, Snubnut talked all the time about a holy sound, like making a holy kind of sound. And I think that's what she's really. I mean, I think she's trying to do this in all of her work, but especially Plague Mass is a manifestation of this kind of like what kind of noise are we making for these dying people? I mean, it's not just about an indignation for these people in power, but it's also cathartic for the people suffering and dying of HIV and the people who have survived them, who've like sat next to them in their bed, as they're dying, sitting with the dying as they're dying. It's also cathartic for them. So I think that the devils and angels, it's complicated. I think it's really complicated. I think that it. In this Western, sort of Judeo-Christian context, it's always going to be complicated. But I think that her music, and I think music in general transcends any kind of political discussion you might have about religion.
I think so too. I mean, but I'm kind of more, thinking though about the political thing about well, she's into the sort of French like decadence. The decadent poets and stuff. And so, and when you got like, give me sodomy or give me death, I'm trying to think of how to say this. because AIDS was viewed by these people as being punishment for not just homosexuality, but for like decadence and for hedonism.
Drug use, yeah, drug use.
It's viewed as for hedonistic. So it's like at that time, maybe there's this sort of transgressive power to hedonism.
Oh, absolutely.
You know, and
absolutely.
decadence.
Yeah.
And I do think about how nowadays that has changed a little bit. I think now it's changed a lot in the sense that now I think, you know, you've got like kids just fucking around on OnlyFans like it ain't no thing. I think, you know, like sexual hedonism and decadence does not have that same transgressive valence to it now. It's a little more status quo to you know what I'm saying? Like,
I do know what you're saying. I think that it's interesting because I think that we're kind of, as much as there's, you know, with the internet, there's all kinds of crazy access to all kinds of pornographic scenarios, any kind of thing you might want to, you know, engage in. It's sort of available to you at a moment's notice, at a click of a phone or a swipe of a phone.
And it's just mainstream normalized. I mean, if you turn on Netflix, they're telling you to like fuck a million people. Like that's considered like, you know what I mean? Like,
but at the same time, there's like, you know, there is this political thing happening where homosexual, you know, in Florida, you know, with Ron DeSantis, there's like the, you know, let's like, you know, criminalize being transgender. Let's criminalize, you know, teachers talking about homosexuality. We don't want, and this whole grooming thing that's going on, and there's this grooming sort of propaganda, right? Because it's not really happening, but there's this like language being used on the right where like any kind of conversation about being trans or being queer is like a conversation about grooming, and you can't ever have that conversation. You know, they're trying to associate any kind of sort of, you know, homosexual identity or trans identity with pedophilia, essentially, which is an old thing. This is an old trope from like, you know, turn of the century, you know, or early 20th century about homosexuals being synonymous with pedophilia, which is just not the case. So we're in this at the same time. There's like this, you know, all kinds of sexuality is available to us, and it's all kind of seen as all right, sort of, kind of. But
it's more than all right. I feel like it's everywhere. I mean, the backlash is also happening as well.
But the backlash is intense right now. I mean, they're literally passing laws in all these states around homosexuality, around people being able to transition medically if you're trans. I mean, that kind of, these are literally laws in Texas and Florida and Alabama. I mean, we're having this weird, and I mean, I think that the Me Too movement has also spawned a very good thing. I mean, you know, hooray, positive Me Too movement. But I think it's also spawned almost a witch honey kind of thing around being a predator. So it's complicated because we want people to be accountable for their, you know, sexual, you know, transgressions, the non-consensual stuff. We love sexual perversion when it's consensual, right? We love kinks of all kinds when it's consensual.
I think part of the should we even? I think part of the reason why the Me Too thing has took off is because sexuality has become so liberated that it, in certain ways, becomes too liberated, and people start doing shit. Or not that people start. It's like boundaries get broken down, and then they have to be
Well, I mean, I think that in the most famous sort of Me Too cases, it was always like a thing about abuses of power. So it was like men in powerful positions abusing those powerful positions to, you know, get women, mostly women, sometimes men. Maybe we shouldn't go off on Me Too because it is kind of tangential. But I am thinking about just like hedonism, though. How just to bring it back, that like that that it's true that it's not as transgressive. It doesn't mean the same thing to be sexually give me some
hedonistic, you know.
If you go back to the give me sodomy or give me death, I mean, it's certainly, you know, about being provocative in a lot of indignation. But I mean, you know, one could sleep with one person and, you know, get HIV and, you know, have to, you know, it's not, I mean, I don't think that homosexuality is necessarily synonymous with hedonism. I mean, certainly many of us have many partners. I've certainly had many, many, many partners and hope to have many more before I die, you know, consensually. But it, you know, but in the context of that piece, I don't think that it's necessarily about a kind of hedonism. I think that like, it was just the very nature of homosexuality. I mean, like, I think about like people like, I mean, my voice teacher who survived, and he's like, you know, was around in the 80s and is not HIV positive. I mean, he, I think, had, one partner for like 20, 25 years. I think he even says that, that's probably why he's still alive. They were in a monogamous relationship.
Well, no, it's not so much that I would necessarily associate homosexuality with hedonism, although, but in the case of AIDS, that's part of what the people were blaming.
That's the propaganda. That was the propaganda for sure. Yeah.
Well, but also spread a lot because of promiscuity. I mean, that is part of the spreading, is But
it is also true that you can have one experience with someone and then become
you can get it once. But also just, I mean, her her love of the French decadence, though, I mean, is sort of Baudelaire and stuff. I mean, that this is about a sort of decadence and hedonism. And
well, we
stuff,
also have to note that Diamanda has a deep, intense love for everything. The homosexual man is a love affair that she has, and we're having with her. It's a mutual love affair that's happening between. That precedes Plague Mass and goes way beyond it. I mean, the number of goths at her shows and the number of homosexuals at her shows. To say, we went to see her in Pittsburgh. We drove there to see her, and it was the Warhol Museum presented her in Pittsburgh, and just the number of drag queens at the show, the number of goths. It was just a beautiful thing. And so it is true that she has. And so I mean, I think that her. There was never any judgment from her about whether someone's promiscuous or not, or hedonistic, or I mean, it's all. I mean, the thing about health education, sort of sexual health education, or even harm reduction for people who are meal users, who intravenous drug users. It's never about any kind of judgment about whether you're doing the drugs or not, or how many partners you have. It's just about how do we have you have the optimal health outcome? Which I think is of course. I think to sort of foreground that. So there's never any kind of judgment around that. And I think that certainly what's been mainstreamed in the last 20, 30 years around homosexuality is a very kind of milquetoast homosexuality. The Neil Patrick Harris kind of homosexuality. I think I had a crush on him when he was Doogie Howser. I think we're the same, more or less the same age. So it wasn't it was a kid. I saw a kid on TV. Maybe I had a crush on him. Anyway, so I mean, nothing against him, but it's that kind of sort of white male homosexual kind of thing versus something a little more radical, something more interesting. I mean, I think that also. I think it's important and interesting to think about, speaking of sort of identities, the Diamanda is very much a female composer, but you don't even end up sort of talking about her in those terms because she's so beyond anything like that,
Well, she doesn't. I mean, does her work? Well, Wild Women with Steak Knives. There's stuff about womanhood in there.
I mean, in her homicidal love songs, all the covers she did of these sort of pop and jazz standards and blues standards, she always was sort of approaching them from a homicidal standpoint. Her rock
revenge,
album,
female revenge.
The horror film, the female revenge horror film, kind of slasher film thing, Final Girl thing. But her record with John Paul Jones, which
it's cool. It's cool. Yeah.
It's a very cool record. I mean, that's a lot about sort of love songs, and they're very homicidal and very she's very much I think people talk about her in terms of being a witch a lot too. I mean, I think that
she owns that. I mean, with the sound. I mean, she almost there's cackling. There's almost use of cackling as a noise
cackling,
element.
Speaking in tongues, all this kind of
possession. It's possession.
Yeah, I mean, it's also a part of there's a long Greek tradition of women who sing at funerals, who sing, in the funereal tradition in Greek. So she's very much, I think, a part of that history. She's she's endlessly fascinating. And I also think that part of why I wanted to talk about her in this piece is I'm thinking a lot about what it means to be an avant-garde artist now in 2023, what it means to make work that doesn't have an immediate market appeal, that can't be sort of consumed by some kind of market capitalist way that we consume music. And I mean, we know people, who work.
Well, I wonder because I the word avant-garde, it's really, I don't hear it a lot now. Actually, I mean, I don't know if it's sort of as much of a concept. And to me, I like and I'm interested in that. When you said avant-garde, your sort of next sentence about it was that just music that doesn't have an immediate commercial function or appeal, and that doesn't immediately plug into the market, you know. But you know, I think traditionally when people say avant-garde, I mean, it really is beyond that. It's you know, the way people would use that term would mean pushing things forward, you know, not just that it's non-commercial, but that it is like serving some kind of function for, you know, progress or something, which it's weird. I love the idea of making music that doesn't plug right into business and the market. I love that.
Yeah.
As far as the idea of moving things forward, that's appealing, but I don't know if I personally relate to that sense of the avant-garde. You know what I mean? Like, I've never really made music that's sort of like, this is avant. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I know what you're saying, and I guess I wouldn't think of you as an avant-garde.
No, I wouldn't.
Composer. I wouldn't think of your work that way. But I mean, I think like Brandon Lopez, you know, your former roommate, who's like a bassist. Because that's Brandon, right? You live with him, right?
Yeah.
I think of like him and Michael Foster. I think of like what they're. I mean, they're jazz players, you know, primarily. I think of them and within the realm of like this avant-garde tradition. Is that fair?
I don't think so. I mean, Brandon's brilliant. He's an absolute ripper. I mean, I don't think what those guys are doing is really taking anything in a forward, really. I mean, as far as it's just being really good, you know, as far as I can, as far as I'm concerned, is all I really care about is just like, is it deep or not?
Well,
so when I say I don't really hear them as avant-garde, to me, that's not a criticism at all, actually.
Well, but because
I'm not either,
in the sense of not having, it's not commercial music they're making now.
Well, I'm saying like making, okay, I mean, there are people, and this isn't really like Brandon and Michael Foster, but I mean, there are plenty of people now who are just make music that just sounds like Albert Ayler. I mean, it just sounds exactly like Albert Ayler exactly like Cecil Taylor, and people be like, oh, that's avant-garde, because it's not commercial. It has to be funded by arts institutions to exist. Yeah. But it sounds like it's as old-fashioned as like the Beatles. I mean, you know what I'm saying?
It's true. It's absolutely true. You have to be really good to play that way, but you're absolutely right. It becomes a coffee table tradition.
Yeah, but that's the thing. But to me, that's not a criticism, because I don't make music that is or aspires to be avant-garde. Although if I'm talking to a regular person who's not into a lot of crazy stuff, I might use that word as this shorthand for what you said before, which is just music that doesn't immediately plug into.
I guess I've also been. I mean, maybe I'm thinking about the term because I've been like obsessed with like certain fashion designers lately, like Comme des Garçons, certain label, or Rick Owen, or Margiela. You know, like in fashion realms. Carol Christian Pole, those designers are considered avant-garde, and there's, at least in the current internet fashion world, people use that term to sort of describe a kind of style.
They do. So that's not an outmoded expression in fashion. People say avant-garde in fashion. They say it.
I mean, it's not. I don't know. I mean, I guess. Is it applicable? I think it's applicable in. I mean, I lean on it because I guess I'm like trying to, you know. And this is like less about now, but we're talking maybe more about my own kind of dilemmas and less about Diamanda. But like, I mean, it's like I think it's maybe about my own difficulty in being in the world, you know, and sort of trying to grab onto things, latching onto things that like resonate. And
you mean the term avant-garde, or the idea of it? That's right. Like, you know, that means something to you for sure.
It's helpful in terms of like an historical grounding for me, and that's about music, but it's also about fashion. It's also about a way of living, a way of being.
I guess, you know what, it's a weird thing, because it's like I would never describe what I do as avant-garde or trying to fulfill what I think that word means. However, artists from the past who were avant-garde then
wouldn't describe themselves as that either.
Well, I'm not sure if they would or not, but I relate to those artists. You know, John Cage was very much avant-garde. I relate to that.
Yeah.
I relate to those people, even though I don't personally relate to like being quote unquote avant-garde. Because it's almost like, do you have a linear? I'm not asking you, but it's like, does one have a linear view? I keep returning to this, like this linear view of like art or music being like a progression, like it's going in a certain direction. You know what I mean? Like there's this story of like, and then this led to this, and this led to this.
Yeah.
And like, you know, are you avant-garde in that you're at the front of that, pushing it forward? Whereas like I just be like, well, I'm just going off to the side.
Well, in many
like,
ways,
you know.
that but that definition of avant-garde, I think, is because I think that with music and art, I think you have to talk about a modernism and a postmodernism, or at least that's, you know, how I think a lot of the stuff ends up being talked about. And so I think in modernist tradition, it really is about invention, newness, you know, sort of that whole thing. You know, versus postmodernism, which is all more about pastiche. It's more about sort of the blending of various styles.
Right. So, you know, it's like, can you be avant-garde in that world?
In a postmodern context. I mean, what's interesting though about Diamanda though is that I would place her more in a modernist trajectory than a postmodernist trajectory. I mean, like in a way that I would put, you know, like Cecil Taylor or Nick Coleman. I think they're kind of the culmination of like a kind of high modernist moment in Black music, right? The Cecils, the late John Coltrane, the, you know, or Nick Coleman.
Well, that,
you know,
I mean, that stuff,
because
I mean, that stuff, there's a jazz tradition, which I guess you could also then plug that into classical music, and then also blues, you could go back. But like, if you're looking at jazz as a tradition, then Cecil Taylor and John Coltrane are avant-garde because they like are the logical continuers of a thing that's going in a direction, and they push it.
Well, I also think it parallels with painting too. I mean, I think it parallels with when you get into like the Jackson Pollocks and the William de Koonings and the white paintings, the black paintings. I mean,
that's self-consciously, self-consciously avant-garde. You know, I mean, do you think Diamanda would call herself an avant-garde artist?
I don't think so. I don't think she would. I think she. I mean, to me, I think she's just she seems driven by me. I mean, you know, obviously, you know, working on that voice. You know, you don't end up with a voice like that without a lot of like labor. You know, play piano like that without a lot of labor. So she's obviously driven by, you know, the craft of being a singer and being a player. But I think she's also thematically driven by, you know, the isolated person, the castaway person, the person who's cast out. I think that's often been the subject of her work from the beginning. The person who's isolated, the person who's been, you know, sort of medically experimented upon. You know, it's very like, you know, when you think about Foucault's, you know, Madness and Civilization, or Discipline and Punish, the leper in Madness and Civilization, that person who's like, you know, been placed out, you know, away from the world. We must put them away from, you know, the population so they can't be, you know, infected by their disease. I mean, I think that she's very much, that's a consistent sort of theme throughout it. She's like really motivated by that. These cast out, these people who are cast out of society, I think.
So like avant-garde, right? Does that have to do with an outsider thing more than a progress? More than a progress thing, and more of like, being interested in the cast out, the least of these, the abject, the other, the marginal or marginalized, right? Like, is that inherently avant-garde? I don't know. This is I'm just riffing on the word.
No, I don't know if that's inherently avant-garde. I think that some people would say it's deeply Christian. I mean, the least of these, you know, that's like a deeply Christian kind of thing, which is kind of a certain kind of populism with Christianity. So I mean, but it also, but I think at the core of Christianity, you know, maybe not the mega churches, but the core of Christianity is a kind of disavowal of like material possessions, of worldliness. One of my favorite spirituals is "Give me Jesus, you can have all this world, but give me Jesus, dark midnight was my cry." I mean, I love this whole thing of like an abdication of the world, you know, sort of in all its kind of like materiality, right, and surrendering yourself into a kind of a spiritual realm. Like that's where I'm strangely there right now in my own work. Like I'm in this place of like kind of letting not that I've ever been invested in the material world, but really letting go of the material world and maybe even this physical plane, giving oneself over to some other dimension, you know, some other kind of like existence.
Yeah. I mean, her stuff, Christianity, that's the thing, man. I mean, there's this Antichrist vibe going. There's this Antichrist vibe thing with what you're doing, but there's a church vibe in both. There's a Black church vibe, you know, in both. Particularly with this use of repetition, too. I mean, there's something like Black Christian the black church gets into this vibe, this oratory of repetition.
Well, there's also the call and response though that she's engaged in this like where she's almost responding to herself, but it almost like begs a response from the congregation.
It refers to it. It refers to it. Yeah,
would beg the kind of like, are you speaking back to me? Speak back to me. I mean, I just think also I want to set the scene of what 1990 New York Cathedral of St. John the Divine, like all of the homosexuals who must have made the trek all the way uptown 114th Street on the west side, all the way up there to that gorgeous, it's Cathedral of St. John the Divine. It's a really a magnificent, magnificent structure of sonic. I mean, to make sound in there is really just, I would just imagine all the homosexuals, drag queens, sort of deviant types who were in the crowd. I'm just trying to imagine, it was recorded over 2 nights. There were 2 different performances that live recording was made from. I'm just imagining what that must have meant for the people in the crowd. Also, maybe involved in ACT UP, involved in the activism around AIDS and HIV at the time. I mean, I'm just trying to put myself in, and then her being of service to that crowd.
Such an important New York thing too. Just that. I mean, she's plugged into that whole downtown tradition.
I mean, in many ways. I mean, like when I moved to New York in 2006, like someone was asking me if I was moving here to be like really to make it big, and I was like, no, I'm moving to New York to be our house. It was like her. When I moved here, Laurie Anderson, Karen Finley, Kathy Acker, who was dead, but was a part of this kind of East Village tradition. The Tonic, which actually closed the year I moved here, but that club.
It's funny when I met you. I met you in Manhattan at Santos Party House.
Yes.
Through that OTO. Organized thing. And I remember when we first started hanging, I remember thinking like, Lamar and actually some of the people around, like, I guess, Larkin introduced us. Like, I remember thinking like, Lamar, even though I knew you, we played shows in Brooklyn and you worked at Goodbye Blue Monday and stuff, even though you're part of that Brooklyn thing, I remember thinking like, like this guy is holding it down for a downtown Manhattan tradition that is Diamanda. No, this is a good thing. This is like, because the whole Brooklyn thing that I was really in, sort of like it wasn't as connected to the whole like tradition of the Laurie Anderson and the John Zorn and the Philip Glass and stuff. So I remember thinking that you were on a different tip of stuff that I was already really into, that was a little more Diamanda-ish. You know what I mean?
No, for sure. It's actually ironically to all that. The Glove, the last days of the Glove. The Glove was a DIY space that existed. I think you played one show there, and I played
one show. The Glove is fucking cool, man.
It was so amazing. It doesn't exist anymore. It was one of those like sort of illegal spaces where amazing music happened in its last days. I played like 5 or 6 shows there. I mean, I played there a lot.
It was only around for like 3 years.
Yeah, it wasn't there very long, so it's crazy how much I managed to play there, which I'm very grateful for. John Zorn played one of the last shows there.
Did he really?
Yeah,
man.
Those connections that Manhattan, sort of like sort of like that thing of like music that needs to exist, somehow that doesn't have like infrastructure to exist within like the kind of corporate thing. I mean, I think that John Zorn still being present in a space like the Glove is amazing.
The thing is though, that downtown scene though, or like that tradition, it might be like sort of weirdo outsider art house stuff, but there's this sense of high art excellence or something. Which is not so much the scrappy DIY punk thing. I come out of the scrappy DIY punk thing to an extent.
I do too.
But there's always to me, I don't know, in that culture there is this. It does lack this sort of grand. That culture lacks a certain grand vision of like of someone. That Wagnerian spirit of opera, this
or even just like the grand traditions of avant-garde writers like Bataille we were talking about earlier, or these Burroughs, Throbbing Gristle. I mean, there's a lineage of that kind of. I think Throbbing Gristle absolutely had a grand vision. I mean, there's like a DIY vibe to it, but there was a grand kind of vision to the whole thing. So
there's a high art thing going on.
I think in Noni, I think more recently in Noni, who also emerged from that East Village thing. Gallows,
huge Noni fan, and she's very much
a part of that.
Holding that
whole
down,
kind. I mean, there's a whole cabaret side to that. She's I mean, I think that there is not a part of the cabaret side. There's a whole cabaret thing happening in the Lower East Side too. That
the
is,
like torch song,
yeah,
gay
the
thing.
Vivian Bond. Like she's very much in that tradition, and that's a grand tradition that has like, I mean, they have, she has audiences, that, like a lot of the downtown. I mean, like stuff doesn't end up happening. Like there's an audience for it, but like Vivian Bond, ended up being on Broadway, and no necessarily have. I mean, they had like pretty big audiences.
Yeah.
This is downtown kind of thing, and so yeah, I mean, my reason for coming here. And I mean, being back in San Francisco too, there's no really all the stuff that I'm really informed by. There's no context really for it in San Francisco. I really make no sense in San Francisco at all, and in LA even too. I think that I mean, I do stuff in LA, and it's wonderful to do stuff there. And it's wonderful to do. I mean, I love playing everywhere, but I mean, there's not. New York is what is in the streets here, what's in the sort of the DNA of the city. It's extraordinary in terms of traditions.
Dude, I keep saying, when I'm back in New York, you are going to be seeing my face around, dude. I am out and about. I don't know how out and about you've been lately, or versus how hermity you've been.
I've been trying to be out and about more. It's been a goal of mine. To be outside,
because I keep saying to people, like, I'm not taking my people for granted this time around, and I'm not taking the city for granted this time
but
around.
You also grew up in New York, so I think it's a really big deal to like. I mean, I know you went to college at Wesleyan, but I mean, I think to leave the place you grew up is important. But when you grew up in New York, maybe you don't need to leave, because like I feel culturally really jealous of anyone who grew up here just with the access to all the stuff that I love. Because as much as I love everything downtown, I love it. I just saw like Porgy and Bess last year at the Met, and it was really, there were moments that were just transcendent to me. Man. At the Richard Tucker Awards, and saw all these opera singers that, David Geffen Hall or whatever. I mean, I love all of it. Like I love the uptown stuff. I love the downtown stuff. I love punk shows. I love noise shows. I love metal shows. I love St. Vitus, obviously. I love all of it.
Growing up, I did not take it for granted. I went to shit for sure. I was there. But, toward the end of before I moved to LA, I was just kind of like, I don't know, looking back, I'm like, damn, man, I didn't know how good I had it being in New York, So I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming that if you're listening to this, you're probably a mega Diamanda fan, and you probably know her latest record, Broken Gargoyles, that just came out last year, and probably know her entire oeuvre. But I'm a super fan. I think that sometimes, like on her birthday, I usually like do these like epic Diamanda posts, and I think some of her, some of the fandom, we're like, I'm friends with a lot of fandom. They're like, I love, I got to talk about how much I love her or whatever, and then someone's like, we know, like maybe they get sick of me talking about how much I love Diamanda, but I mean, it's really, there just aren't words. I'm trying to sort of talk about this. This relationship that I had to these opera singers, these Black opera singers, Leontine, Jessie, Marian Anderson, super important to me. And then how that kind of ended up being this complete obsession with, especially Leontine, obsession with these singers, and then how that ended up being translated or moved over into Diamanda, this like white Greek American, woman. Although I don't think she thinks of herself as white, because she grew up in San Diego, which is very like, close to Mexico, and she speaks lots of languages. She's very American, but very international. She's very international. Yeah.
Sings
Well,
lots of languages all the time.
The idea that a Greek person would be not white that's not an insane idea. I mean, it's sort of.
Well, Italians
I wouldn't have
white.
an opinion. I would have an opinion on it.
Even Italian people weren't white until like they got here, and Irish people weren't like white. Like white. No, of course. In the U.S. context, things get like sort of homogenized and like. They're like,
but even now, it's like if you're Greek, I mean, if you're making a big deal out of being Greek, like it's really part of your culture and stuff, that has a non-white vibe to it. Like it has a sort of Eastern or Near Eastern kind of vibe to it.
I mean, I think given the sort of the genocidal activity that happened, at the hands of like the Turks, historically, I think that, I mean, you have to talk about that genocide along with the Holocaust of, in Germany with the Jews. You have to talk about it alongside, chattel slavery, in the U.S. context, like with Black people. So I mean, I think that
there's common cause.
Yeah, I mean, but I like include what was happening with like Irish people historically too. I mean, like there's a lot of a lot of us can, relate to genocidal activity around our people,
Yeah.
And I think that we're in a very touchy place politically in this world right now. And I don't know. I mean, I'm in a place of like loving everybody. Like, I mean, that's like my
I know.
new vibe.
Yeah. That's not brand new to hear you say, but it's a little more positive than sometimes.
Well, one of the things, I mean, with a lot of years of therapy, I realized that a lot of the rage and anger I was directing outwards was a lot about the rage and anger I had towards myself. And if I could let go of the rage I had for the world, maybe I'd be able to like love myself a little more effectively.
These things feed
Yeah,
feed each other.
feedback
So,
loops. We love feedback loops. I love
I
feedback
know. Well,
loops.
that's like that's the modern condition is feedback loops.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm definitely not feeling misanthropic, man. But do I feel love? Am I feeling a ton of love for everyone? I'm feeling a certain amount of alienation from folks who I don't know if we're cool anymore, and we're gonna see.
Well, we'll definitely see.
We'll see. We'll see. You and I
see.
are obviously cool. We'll be hanging out, so I'll see. But
No, but I mean, you. I mean, to be fair, you've made it difficult a little bit, for some to embrace you as much as we all would like to.
Depends on who Depends on who we. I don't know.
Who's the we?
I don't think. Yeah, I don't. Yeah. I don't think there's I don't think there's a monolith of people who have a problem with me.
Yeah,
but,
maybe this is another.
That's an off-camera. This is an off-camera.
Maybe it's not even another live stream. Maybe it's fully off-camera.
Off-camera conversation.
Off-camera.
But yes, love for everyone. I love hearing it. I'm not right there. Love for everyone. I'm not right there, but I've got no hate. I'll tell you, I've got no hate in my heart right now. That is various negative emotions. None of them are hate.
I hate to sound selfish about them. I mean, I hate to sound like it's really been good for me to like stop hating people.
Yeah.
Or even feeling threatened by people. Like hypervigilance is this.
Hypervigilance, yeah. Kirsten uses that word a lot too. Not about hatred, but hypervigilance. Yeah. This activation and defensive,ness and feeling unsafe.
Fight, flight, or freeze, like things when those are heightened, all those things. Hypervigilance. What I've actually had to do with, because I have had that, because I've often felt threatened. Because for fair reason, on the street or whatever, I just let it all go. I'm
man.
If somebody takes me out, it's fine. I've lived long enough. I've done great work. I'm good. I just can't. It's exhausting. It's really, really exhausting. Hypervigilance, like sort of being, sort of having a lot of rage and anger. It's just exhausting. I think one reaches a point where one is just exhausted from it. And either you become like a horrible human being, it can eat you alive, or you maybe hopefully turn a corner. I mean, there's lots of.
I had a friend of mine who she was recommending that I reconcile with someone else who I've become alienated from in a mutual sort of way.
Oh, you mean a former bandmate?
And just people I know. And and my friend was like, you should reach out to her and make friends with her before you come home. And I was like, yeah, but blah, blah, blah. And she was like, it's for you that you do that. It's not for her. She's like, you're paranoid. You're prone to anxiety and paranoia.
Yeah.
Having little beefs with people is making that shit worse.
Yeah.
And and it's like she's like, there's very few people you actually hate. I mean, there are people who have maybe, there are people who are worth hating. Very few. Very, very few people.
And I think that the people doing all the evil in the world, and there are people doing evil in the world. I mean, my position on them now is like, I really do feel a lot of sadness for them.
Yeah.
The people who are engaging in like sort of power plays and things for like scapegoating people and all the various evils that are happening. I mean, I feel badly. I feel sad for them. I mean, certainly, if we love people, we have to be in political ways fighting against people who are doing damage to other people, and in terms of legislation or various kinds of things happening in the world. But I feel a lot of sadness for them because I think a lot of these people are miserable, people who are running around perpetuating. Yeah,
there are people who are fucking evil. I mean,
Yeah.
there are monsters, man.
Yes,
I mean, and it's like,
absolutely.
and I'm not talking about someone who does harm to people for some reason that you could get in their head. I mean, but there are people who are on a sadistic label. I mean, there are people who need to be like permanently removed from society, like just straight up and down.
I mean, I think that's a delicate thing when we start talking about permanently removing people from society. I mean, but evil does exist, though. It does.
Evil
And
is
people,
real.
we
Evil
have
is
a
real.
lot of
I don't think there's a
evidence.
lot of it. I don't think there's a lot of it, though. I think actual people. There's really very few people who are actually fucking. I don't think I've interfaced.
Well, but I do think
evil.
we have to. This is me getting on my Marxist. I mean, I think capitalism is actually pure evil, though. And I think that's and it has this way of doing all kinds of damage in a society that is.
I agree with you, and I don't even consider myself a quote-unquote leftist or left person, really. And I completely fucking agree with you on that. So yeah.
I mean, I was just in San Francisco, and I have a deep relationship with San Francisco, and the funeral home I played in Oakland, Uma Gallery is the place I played. It was really like a wonderful experience, and I got all these people that I was in bands with, formerly came to that show. It was a really beautiful experience, but the homeless population in San Francisco,
dude, the homeless situation in LA, dude, it is so fucking heartbreaking, man. It's unbelievable to look at.
And I mean, this
unreal.
And I mean, we know. I don't know about what's going on in LA as much as what was happening in San Francisco, but we know that all this real estate kind of speculation going on, and all the kind of like, we're going to raise these rents to impossible sort of things for people to be able to pay for. I mean, there's just like, I mean, so people can get more and more rich. I mean, there's a fundamental evilness to like this accumulation of wealth to the detriment of people who don't have my boyfriend Saban did the math for like Elon Musk. I guess when he bought Twitter, lost, I don't know, however much money he lost, like, I don't know, hundreds of millions of dollars or something, maybe $1 billion, something like that. He lost a lot of money. Still, He's fine though. We don't have to worry about him. He's doing just fine. But like, he could have given every American, Saban did the math, $500,000. With the money he lost. So like the fact that like one individual has the amount in terms of the money they're losing to give every person in
it's
we
demented.
have rough data about it's demented.
It's demented. It's demented.
It is pathological. There's a pathology around that kind of accumulation that is a sickness, is a deep sickness. So I mean, there's like, and it perpetuates a lot of other kinds of evils that like profit margins and corporate mentalities perpetuate a certain kind of evil that's fundamentally structural. I mean, there's like a lot of the railing that one needs to do around patriarchy and white supremacy is about structural things. It's not about individuals. It's about systems in place that benefit people at the top. Anyway,
let's not. Yeah, we don't.
Anyway,
because let's just stick with
for Diamanda fans,
let's stick with what we agree with, which is that Elon Musk should not have that much money. That this should be uncontroversial on the last thing's live stream. But yeah, I mean, Diamanda, we could I think I bet we could go for 4 hours, 5 hours, fluid exchange style. But I think hour and a half. I'm sort of keeping these a little bit.
Oh, we should inform people. I mean, I guess some people know that we used to do a podcast together called Fluid Exchange.
Yeah.
Still
people.
Available.
I know. Yeah, Fluid Exchange still available. This is me and Lamar's podcast from short-lived from like 2017 to 18. I'm still very happy with these. Even the sort of
that one
episode that should be the lost episode, but it's not lost. But it's not lost. It's still up. I actually think we're okay in that. I don't. Yeah, whatever. People should check out Fluid Exchange.
And also, we Charlie wrote string arrangements for an album that I have called Surveillance, Punishment, and the Black Psyche. Charlie is, I mean, but there might be people who come who don't know you. Obviously, probably a lot of people, so you should know that Charlie is a genius with the string writing and the composing, and his own work is like, Simple Answers, I think, is your masterwork. I know the new Extra Life album. I enjoyed that record too. It's a really great.
I like that you think Simple Answers is my masterwork, because not everyone thinks that. I'm not sure what I think about it. What I think matters possibly less than what my friends who I respect think, actually. But duly noted, Lamar.
The composition on that is really amazing. And what you have to say is, it's complicated. It's complicated, and but
I'm so much worse now, dude. Now it's not. That was just the beginning. No, and I'm coming around again. We do need to catch up, because
we need to catch up. Yeah. It's gonna be fun. It's gonna be interesting.
But yeah.
So just for people who don't know, we have a long history, Charlie and I, and I think it's a glorious, grand history. If people are interested in checking out what we've done together musically, and then we have a podcast we've done together as well. So us talking to each other is a thing that is not just a thing we do privately, but also publicly. We've done before, and just all love, all hail the Queen, Diamanda. I really there's just not enough. I don't know. I mean, if you would have watched this, I hope I didn't get too many things wrong. I'm sure I must have gotten some things wrong, and so I apologize for anything I got wrong. Is there anything? Should we respond to anything in the chat? I'm looking at the.
Now could be a good time. To wrap it up with responses. We didn't have a lot of people aren't really asking a bunch of questions, which is okay.
Are there any comments worth reading? Oh, someone else says they also think The Simple Answers is your masterpiece.
Very nice. Yeah, Juan is awesome. Juan says he used to be a fan of Elon Musk, but since last... Hey, man, I mean, there are worse people on planet Earth, that's for sure. But, sometimes it's like, are you talking about a person, or are you talking about the phenomenon that is just this person as a machine, as a machine in the world, you know what I mean? But, let's see. Yeah, this is... none of these are real questions or challenges, which is totally fine.
It's totally fine.
But people liked Fluid Exchange, man. People really did. I think it's good that we're doing our own solo joints. But dude, I mean, how you've been continuing to do YouTube stuff, but I really think that you should go hard as a YouTube person, man. I don't know if that you have enough time, that you're even down to commit to that, because it takes a lot of time and bandwidth and consistency. Yeah. But dude, you should be doing. Hey, should, what the fuck? It's not my business. But I would love it if you did as much of your YouTube stuff as I'm doing of mine. Yeah. Relentless. People want it, man. People want you to talk.
Okay.
A lot.
I've heard that before. Is that true? People in the chat, do you find what
I do? I do, man. Yes, absolutely, man.
So though that could happen. I mean, if I try to answer calls. So if there's a call for that, then I'll step up to the call. If you feel like there really is a call, I want to answer calls if I'm called to do something. So
Okay. Yeah. I mean, but there's something to be said for just doing something, whether people want it or not.
But also I want to be, in these years I have left, whatever those are, however many I have, I want to be of service. I don't want to just be, part of being an artist is that you have these obsessions, these things you want to explore, and then you work really hard to explore them and develop them. But also, I want to be of service, to the world.
Yeah, well, this is what I started with the YouTube channel. I was like, you know what? I mean, this isn't as deep as what I do musically, but it's definitely of value, So I'm just kind of in between records. I have stuff to offer that's not.
Yeah, no, I don't catch your live streams usually when you're doing them, but I watch them back and they're good. They're really good.
It's very peripheral to deep work, but it's I like that, it's while the other stuff's incubating, you just give people this worthwhile, blah 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 blah.
Well, I also think we're in a cultural context where people want more of people's personalities, I don't really talk about this, but I did a reality TV show last year. I don't want to no one go watch it. But
I heard about this. Yeah, I heard about this.
And see, I didn't tell you about it. Anyway, we didn't talk
Kirsten told me.
Oh, that's hilarious. Anyway, but so I don't really want to, but someone said, because I wasn't performing music on this stupid show, but I was, but someone was like, on my TikTok, because I just post like little, sort of sound checks or like little rehearsals or whatever, like music I'm doing. But there was one of me just like laughing or something, and there's someone who saw me on this stupid reality show, and they were like, "Why would we want to see more of your personality? We want like more of your," and I mean that's been a thing I've always resisted, trading on any kind of charisma I might have or anything. Maybe I have none, but I might. I've been told
I think you definitely do, man. I mean, it's yeah, but you don't want to like cash in on it in a like direct.
I mean, I've always resisted
way.
it, but I don't. I mean, but the reasons why I think early on were clear to me when I was a little younger than they are now. Like I'm like,
when I'm sure you cash in on. How often do you cash in on it sexually? Right, probably pretty often. So cash in on it. Cash in on it with other flows, other streams, as it were.
We're keeping all of this above the waist, This was just all above the waist, and we won't talk about how much I'm cashing in on anything sexual.
Yeah, well, that's actually yeah. I shouldn't have even brought up sex because this is my new whole thing. Is I'm all wholesome and shit, and I don't talk about filth. I don't talk about filth publicly anymore.
Is that true?
Well, the new Extra Life is totally chaste.
I guess you're right. Yeah,
there's nothing.
I'm also publicly trying to be less sexual too. Isn't that?
It's just kind of awesome. I think it just lends this sort of you repress the erotic thing down and it becomes like a diamond,
Well, my erotic thing is not repressed down.
Well,
but it has full life. I have a boyfriend who's very happy with our sex life.
Well, I don't mean repressed. I mean in the expressions, in the public expressions.
Sure.
But in any case, yeah. But yeah, man. Well, so yeah, right. We've done some great stuff together. We're gonna keep doing it. And check out the old Fluid Exchange stuff. I mean, do you have so Ray, your next thing, right? Before we go, let's plug your upcoming thing, which is called remind me what this is, the Space Age thing.
So this piece I shouldn't really announce it.
Okay,
it's really not premiering until 20. I mean, we're gonna start workshopping it next year, 2024.
Okay. So you're very much in the incubating laboratory phase
part of why
a big thing.
Was I was working. It is a piece I'm working on with Living Earth Show. I did an album with him called Lordship and Bondage, Birth of the Negro Superman. That is available now, but we're working on a new record, and that's the new record that I was talking to you about before we went live. And but I'm doing a show in New York, actually. If people are in New York, I'm doing a show at this place called Pangea in the East Village, and I haven't done a show in Manhattan in quite a while, actually. I actually don't remember the last time I did a show in Manhattan. So I mean, I do shows in Brooklyn all the time, but so that's on March 5th.
All right.
So that's in a few weeks in Manhattan. And I'm doing a show in Canada, actually, at Saw Gallery, May 5th. So for people who are in Ottawa, Canada, at Saw Gallery, it's like the 50th anniversary of that gallery. I did a show there a long time ago with Ron Athey, and they're inviting people who've done shows at that space over the last like 50 or so years. So anyway, I'm going to be in Canada in like May 5th. So if people are in New York or in Canada, those are the sort of immediate shows that are coming up. But then I'm working on a new sort of big epic piece that I don't want to talk about publicly quite yet.
All right.
But yeah.
Sweet. Well, Lamar, thank you so much for coming on. We got to do this more. We got to do this more and more. And dude, I can't wait to hang with you in New York.
I know. We can't wait to have you back in New York.
We gotta do a little face-to-face action.
It hasn't been the same without you. You're gonna get on the M train. Get on the M train and just come to me, because I don't know if I want to go to your hood. I guess I could, but Bushwick is still hopping. Bushwick is still a vibe. It's different though.
But Glendale is hopping with like adults. You know what I'm saying? Bushwick is like right. I mean, it's kind of kids a little bit. Right?
I mean, there are a lot more young professionals living here now.
Oh yeah, no, but not so much NYU. Not so much NYU. Like
that's still here. That's still happening too. That's still happening, but less. I would say. I find that I still love Bushwick. I mean, there's still a lot of shows that happen here. A lot of art and culture happen here. Yeah,
dude, come to Glendale, man. Dude, cops and firemen, dude. Cops and firemen.
We'll do both. I'll come to Glendale. You'll come to Bushwick. Yeah. We'll play shows together. Yeah, dude. I mean, I'm also not right off the bat when I get back, but I'm going to start some kind of little Last Things concert series for sure. Like a modest sort of experimental small group solo artists improvise. We love this kind of thing. But something, something. Yeah, Last Things concert series. This is going to be happening. So I'm one of the new projects. So yeah, man. So excited about all of it.
Right.
thank you everyone for tuning into this
Yeah,
conversation
thanks
about
everyone for listening.
the great one. And yeah.
Yeah, and I'm going to say goodbye to everyone at the same time instead of doing the afterward epilogue thing. We're just going to both say goodbye at the same time. All right.
Goodbye.
Later, everyone.